In my previous video covering the first 4 seasons of The Walking Dead, I analyzed how Rick Grimes and the world around him are caught between 2 ideologies, civility and brutality. And for most of that time, Rick stands as the show's primary vessel for civility. That is, until the season 4 finale titled A, where I argued that Rick does not just choose brutality, he is psychologically infected by it, becoming sick with the show's thematic Walking Dead virus. So the question is, once someone turns, can they ever truly come back? Or are Rick and the others already too far gone?
You mean me?
The statement, "in this world you're either a butcher or cattle," is first explicitly stated by the cannibals at Terminus in the opening episode of Season 5, but the concepts behind this idea were really being explored throughout Season 4. Obviously, the walkers and survivors can be seen as representing the butcher and cattle. Zombies prey on and kill humans, positioning the survivors as cattle and the walkers as butchers. Yet this dynamic can also be flipped. Humans have learned to control and use the walkers to their advantage, as we've seen before in the show. In Season 4, we saw Carol attempt to be the butcher instead of the cattle when she kills the sick Karen and David to stop the illness from spreading. We see Farmer Rick as the cattle to the governor's butcher when the governor attacks, and we see it again at the end of Season 4 when the group is deliberately herded into train cars like cattle in the finale. In the Season 5 premiere, we see how Terminus presents itself as a place of civility, but harbors brutal, sinister motives underneath. Terminus is full of cannibals, which mirrors the walkers, both embodying a state of brutality, one inflicted by the zombie virus and the other by the thematic Walking Dead virus. Both have resorted to killing and eating humans for survival. The only difference is that Terminus's humans are more dangerous because they wield the power of deception. When we learn Terminus's backstory in No Sanctuary, we discover that they weren't always the butcher. They used to be the cattle, abused and enslaved by other butchers. Yet despite their trauma, they chose to fight back, and then never allowed themselves to be cattle again, as seen in their Creepy Room's mantra. They embraced being butchers to ensure they wouldn't be victims any longer. And we see it was the trauma in the train car which transformed them into something darker. Another insightful moment I noticed that ties into this idea comes from Season 4 Episode 1 when Rick tells Carl not to name the pigs, and later Carl tells Lizzie not to name the walkers. I think the pigs represent cattle and the walkers represent the butcher here. The show suggests that whether you're a butcher or cattle, the common thread is that both lose their humanity. The cattle lose their lives and are dehumanized, but the butcher ultimately sacrifices their humanity as well in order to commit such harsh acts. This idea sums up much of Season 5, and especially Rick's journey. The idea that you must either embrace brutality and be the butcher, or embrace civility and be the cattle. In either way, your humanity is ultimately at stake. And faced with this choice, Rick has fully embraced brutality after recent events. He fights back, killing nearly all of Terminus's members with Carol's major help, someone who's also determined to be the butcher, not the cattle. A drastic transformation for Carol that is deeply tied to her past as an abused dormant housewife before the apocalypse. And after Rick and Carol lead the escape and destruction of Terminus, Rick doubles down on being the butcher, advocating to return with their guns to finish off any survivors. The group wants to just move on, and Rick only relents because he reunites with Carol, who has Judith. So now free from Terminus, the group meets a lone preacher, Father Gabriel, and takes refuge in his church. And it's now in hindsight, the group probably should have just listened to Rick and remained the butcher, as the Terminus survivors, or the termites, find them again, consume Bob, and mark the church with the same letter A as the train car. But Rick, in his brutal beast mode, outsmarts the termites. He maintains his butcher status by leading them into the church marked A on his own terms, and then fulfills his promise by hacking Gareth to death with his red machete, stating he didn't want to waste the bullets. Some of the group watches, shocked at the brutality they're witnessing, where not just Rick, but several members are almost savoring their kills. In the train car marked A, Rick and his group were the cattle, and now in the church marked A, Rick and his group are the butchers. But in both experiences, they lost a piece of their humanity. Father Gabriel struggles with this violence inside the church, a supposed place of civility, but Maggie, once a church girl herself, rebuts that it's not a church anymore, just 4 walls and a roof. This once again highlights the world's de-evolution, where many things like the survivors are stripped of their humanity and reduced to their bare fundamental state. And while Rick and the group had shown some internal debate about the brutal actions in A and No Sanctuary, here they seem to have just accepted it. Brutality is becoming normalized and they're appearing desensitized. Also, a cool detail I appreciate is how the confrontation between Rick and Gareth in the church mirrors Rick's confrontation with the governor in Too Far Gone. One side pleads for civility and the other rejects it, intending to kill, doing so by hacking away at the opposition, kneeling in front of them. Also, in Season 3, Merle even said to Rick that the governor killed people brutally and intimately with the excuse that he didn't want to waste the bullets.
When he'd go out on runs, he'd bash somebody's skull, slash somebody's throat, and say, "Never waste a bullet. I always thought it was just an excuse.
These parallels between Rick and the Governor as Rick sinks deeper into brutality are no accident, especially as Rick mirrors a different former antagonist even more later in Season 5. Another notable thematic detail involves the next time we see the symbol of the sheriff's badge and gear. When rescuing Beth from the hospital, Rick's group now embodies the side of brutality, while the hospital group represents civility. The hospital's still in a city's high-rise enforcing strict rules and wearing uniforms like cop and nurse outfits, all old-world symbols. And the next time we see the badge, it no longer belongs to Rick. Instead, Rick points a gun at the uniformed cops as he's now the rugged outlaw. Yet one cop immediately senses Rick's past as a sheriff, showing that despite Rick's brutal transformation, that man of law still lives inside him.
Shut up.
A little. After losing Beth, the group spends several episodes on the road, and it's the episode Them that gives deep insight into the major themes. The group struggles physically and mentally without a real home or shelter, which offers a haven of civility. And being exposed out on the road without shelter keeps them locked in a state of brutality. The episode even opens with the group not just questioning how much longer they can survive without food or water, but survive mentally. Throughout the episode, we see the group walking slowly on the road with walkers nearby, visually mirroring the group to the walkers. It's almost as if without a home base of civility, they're doomed to either die from the zombie virus or the thematic Walking Dead virus. And we sadly watch characters like Sasha, Daryl, and Maggie emotionally break down in moments. But the episode's major confirmation of the themes comes from one of Rick's most iconic speeches. He tells the story of his grandfather surviving World War II by compartmentalizing his humanity, shutting himself off to do whatever it takes to survive the horrors, all with the promise of truly being able to live once the war was over. Rick says he has now adopted this mindset and suggests the group does as well. In my view, Rick's already infected by the thematic virus, and that's why it hits so hard when he declares,
We are the Walking Dead.
This line not only shows Rick's state, but also confirms the show's double meaning and its core focus on humanity. But Daryl disagrees with Rick's bold claim, rebutting,
Lead them.
And it's Daryl here who seems to be right. While Rick's journey has taught him civility is weakness, Daryl has learned civility is strength. He knows firsthand that shutting off humanity can't be done indefinitely, because once flipped off too many times, it stays off. It's unnatural and impossible to maintain, as this all echoes Shane's words in Season 2.
Turn off a switch. The switch. The one that makes you scared, or angry, sympathetic, whatever. You don't think, you just act.
Shortly after this, a large group of walkers tries to break down the barn door. The group led by Daryl here unite, pushing back on the door to keep the walkers outside. This scene perfectly symbolizes the episode and the group as a whole, both walkers and survivors pushing against opposite sides of the door, visually representing the divide between them. The group's unity and humanity are their weapons, fighting to keep brutality from entering and overtaking them. And the group succeeds here, seemingly aided by an act of God. A tornado or lightning strike wipes out the walkers while completely sparing the barn. I kinda interpret this as a divine reward for maintaining their humanity and resisting brutality, similar to what many religions believe. By the episode's end, the group has avoided becoming them and is rewarded further when greeted by Aaron, an oddly clean man. While we know that brutality breeds more brutality, it does also appear that civility may also attract more civility. So just as the group has sunk its furthest into brutality and neared losing themselves completely to the Walking Dead virus, they're recruited by Aaron to join Alexandria, a nearby civilization that stands as a polar opposite to their current world. Unlike Woodbury or the hospital, Alexandria resembles the old world more than ever. Their group's leadership and members haven't faced nearly the level of brutality Rick's group has, and they don't know how to survive in this new world, which is why Aaron and Alexandria's leader, Deanna, have sought Rick's group out. Deanna and Aaron have observed not only their strength and survival skills, but also how they've maintained their civility and humanity while out on the road. She wants Rick and his group to help Alexandria survive and prosper in order to rebuild civilization back to what it once was. Before choosing to trust Aaron and enter Alexandria, Rick and Michonne discussed what they heard from beyond the walls when they first arrived at both Woodbury and Terminus. Both of their answers were that they heard absolutely nothing, just silence. So when Rick and Michonne arrive at the gates of Alexandria and hear the sound of kids playing from inside, it releases that initial weight of fear and distrust. Just like the brain when infected by the virus, its pieces of humanity are all gone. It's vacant and its humanity is silent. But when hearing the sound of innocence and kids playing, it immediately shows that humanity is still present in this place. And so they enter Alexandria. But upon their arrival, it's clear how alien the old world has become to Rick and the group. From their behavior to their appearance, They starkly contrast with the more civilized world Alexandria represents. Rick even struggles to recognize himself, first when he looks in the mirror at his rugged state, then even more so after showering and shaving off his beard. For the first time in a long while, the entire group except Daryl gets to shower and clean up, literally closely returning to how they look like before the apocalypse. Deanna, who prides herself on being an expert at reading people, assigns each member a job that reflects who they once were. Rick becomes the constable, Michonne, who's canonically a lawyer, which is another figure who upholds the law, also becomes the constable. Carol resumes the role of a cook and homemaker. Glenn, once a pizza delivery guy, is made the runner to scavenge supplies, and Carl is basically able to be a normal kid again. The one and pretty major exception is Daryl, who neither initially receives a job nor returns to an old world look. Deanna admits she can't quite figure him out yet, and this perfectly reflects what we learned in season 4. How Daryl said he wasn't anything before the apocalypse, that he was just lost, drifting around with his brother Merle. That's why Deanna nails everyone else's old world jobs, but struggles with his. But eventually Aaron gives Daryl the job of recruiter, which mostly operates outside of Alexandria's walls, which is truly perfect for someone who feels more belonging in the new world than the old one. And so as the group settles in, most of them struggle with the mental toll of living in survival mode for so long, and this manifests clearly as PTSD and other mental health issues. They see the civility of the Alexandrians as a weakness, and fear that this level of comfort will erode their own edge. Characters like Rick, Carol, Sasha, and Daryl wrestle with letting civility back into their lives, and Rick and Carol specifically present a false veil of civility, masking their true survivalist mindset lurking underneath. Carol being notably more successful at this facade than Rick. When Rick arrives in Alexandria, he chooses to shower, shave, get a haircut, and adopt an old world appearance. He publicly goes along with Deanna's ways, but privately disagrees with her. He accepts the constable job and wears the sheriff's uniform, but despite looking the most like the Rick we saw at the show's start, it's clear he's not fully mentally present in Alexandria. The episode Forget makes this very clear. At Deanna's welcome party, the group experiences the safest moment they've had in a long time, but they don't quite know how to react. They're torn between embracing brutality, which has kept them alive, and accepting the civility of their new home. This internal conflict is brilliantly expressed in a conversation between Abraham and Michonne at the party. Michonne is trying hard to embrace Alexandria's ways of life, aware of how prolonged brutality can warp a person. They discuss her sword, a long-standing symbol of her brutal survival skills, and Abraham and Michonne's exchange captures her and the group's dilemma.
Live by it, you die by it. Pray to God you don't have to use it again. Pray to God you don't get used to not using it again. It's on your back, even when it's off your back.
Meanwhile, at the party, Rick and the others receive stamps on their hands. Stamps of the letter A meant for Alexandria. But Rick and the audience know what A truly means to them. A reminder of trauma and entrapment, a symbol of the brutality they seemingly escaped yet cannot leave behind. The letter recalls their captivity in the train car, where they were physically trapped by metal and mentally trapped by survivalism, which ties to the episode's final scene. It's funny because I remember being kinda confused the first time I watched the episode's ending, but now it's one of my favorites in the entire series. We see Michonne hang up her sword, choosing to set her brutality aside and embrace the old world civility. Then, as Spicks and Specks by the Bee Gees plays, Rick walks through Alexandria smiling and waving at Jessie, the married woman he's been interested in, while she strolls with her husband Pete. After they pass, Rick's smile fades and he rests his hand on his holstered gun while looking at them. Suddenly, Rick hears the very faint sound of metal rattling outside the walls. He rushes over and listens to a lone walker snarling and banging against the barrier. He places his hand stamped A on the wall and then leans in closer, almost pressing his ear against the metal to hear it better. As he looks down at the A on his hand, this exact positioning mirrors Rick's final scene in the season 4 finale. The moment he was trapped in the train car. While he's now physically free, mentally he remains stuck there in that train car, unable to fully embrace Alexandria's civility. He's still very much a prisoner to the clutches of survivalism. And I think the song Spicks and Specks is a perfect emotional backdrop. It not only provides a unique contrasting sound to what we're watching, but it's really the lyrics that are what to focus on. The song is about the passage of time, loss, and disconnection from what once was. Lyrics like, "Where's the sun that shone on my head? The sun in my life, it is dead, it is dead." They echo Rick's fading humanity. The missing sun is his old world civility and humanity, and the Spicks and Specks are the fragile remnants left of that humanity currently slipping away. And so while the walker in this scene can't breach the walls, a different kind of brutality already has, Rick himself. On this path, he becomes the new threat to Alexandria. And what makes this ending even more compelling is that it not only mirrors Rick's mental state from season 4's finale, but it also directly contrasts his mindset in the first scene of season 4. In that scene, Rick didn't carry a gun openly, now his hand stays rested on it, even without immediate danger. Previously, he blocked out the loud noise of the walkers outside the thin gate with earbuds, but now he strains to hear the faintest sound of a single walker outside of a sturdier barrier. He no longer ignores brutality, he embraces it, and ignores the civility around him. Farmer Rick is long dead. Also, the choice to have Rick wearing the sheriff's uniform again isn't just to emphasize how different he is beneath a once symbolic badge of civility, it shows how the meaning of that symbol has now changed for him. Remember earlier in the series, there was a police officer who represented a different form of the law, one built on the means of brutality? Well, Rick and his law have become a whole lot like that guy. While Rick and Shane's situations aren't identical, and Rick remains the better man, there are striking similarities between the two when Rick enters Alexandria. His fixation on a married woman he tries to protect and pursue, even crossing a line by kissing her, his violent confrontation with her husband, his refusal to leave the safe haven even if kicked out, his belief that the Alexandrians are weak and naive, and his blunt speech demanding they immediately adapt to brutality in the season's penultimate episode, Try. That speech strongly echoes Shane's in Pretty Much Dead Already, where Shane loses his patience over the barn and demands others accept the brutal new reality.
If you want to survive, you gotta fight for it. I'm talking about fight.
Both messages are true, but their delivery alienates others and makes them appear unhinged. And not only is this reminiscent of Season 2, this speech also starkly contrasts Rick's civil approach in Too Far Gone, where he advocated preserving the old world to the governor. This mirror is specifically emphasized when Carol, his metaphorical devil on the shoulder at the time, even smiles approvingly as he gives this speech, just as Herschel once smiled at Rick in Season 4. It's clear, Rick operating in brutality has made him eerily similar to Shane, even dressing like him a couple episodes ago. The final 5 episodes of Season 5 are titled Remember, Forget, Spin, Try, and Conquer. All these words come from a William Faulkner passage quoted by Dale in Season 1. When talking about his watch and why he keeps the time despite the world ending, Dale recites,
I give you the mausoleum of all hope and desire. I give it to you, not that you may remember time, but that you may forget it, and not spend all of your breath trying to conquer it.
So Dale isn't just tracking time, he's reminding himself to slow down and appreciate it, accepting what's happened and not obsessing over controlling what happens next. And this perfectly sums up Rick's arc in these final 5 episodes, as it's likely no coincidence that we linger on Rick setting his watch after Deanna tells him the time when he first enters Alexandria. I believe the mausoleum of all hope and desire is Alexandria itself. A mausoleum is a tomb, a beautifully preserved structure for something dead. And for Rick and the group, Alexandria represents a preserved memory of the old world that they once desired to attain, but now believe is dead and gone. It's now a mere illusion. And remember, the group first enters Alexandria and struggles to remember who they were before the apocalypse. And forget, they wrestle with adapting and letting go of their trauma. Spin shows the cost of integration with the loss of Noah and near loss of Tara. In Try, Rick attempts to solve Alexandria's problems but fails to communicate their urgent need for change. And in Conquer, Rick's demands are finally heard and he's handed the keys to Alexandria. But despite conquering Alexandria, Rick ultimately fails Dale and Faulkner's lesson. The quote reminds us that it is not only important to survive, but to make sure we truly live. That the group's humanity is more important to maintain than their bodily survival. And Rick's dilemma was foreshadowed earlier in Season 5 by Bob's words that now deeply resonate with Rick.
And you're gonna find yourself in a place where it's like how it used to be. And if you let too much go along the way, that's not gonna work. Because you're gonna be back in the real world.
This is the real world, Bob.
Nah, this is a nightmare. The nightmare's end.
While Rick is struggling, slowly dying to the thematic Walking Dead virus, his humanity isn't lost just yet, thanks in part to his strong human connections, which I've theorized is what affects the turn time for living survivors. Bob's lasting wisdom and the influence of Michonne and Carl in the finale instill trust in Rick as a leader, and they urge him to hold on to his civility. With their support, Rick shifts from planning to forcibly take over Alexandria to giving its people another chance, teaching them how to survive so they can truly live and prosper. And the Alexandrians begin to listen to Rick after people Pete kills Reg with Michonne's sword, proving Rick's warnings were valid. Deanna and the others get a glimpse of what Rick sees and open themselves to change. The season ends with the pro-brutality Rick reunited with an original symbol of civility, Morgan, setting up another interesting ideological clash for season 6. And in the post-credit scene, Michonne debates hanging up her sword again, but ultimately decides to keep it, returning it to her back. As Abraham said, the burden of wielding brutality is already on her, even when the sword isn't drawn. That responsibility is better in her hands than anyone else, like we saw with Pete and even the governor back in season 4. You can't ignore brutality, you have to navigate it and find balance. Because just like the ominous wolves teased in the season, brutality is never far away. So while brutality may still be the clear dominant force and consecutive winner for this season, civility is definitely poised for a comeback. The decision to have Morgan reunite with Rick at this point isn't a coincidence, just as it wasn't the last time they crossed paths in season 3. Back then, Rick encountered Morgan in a brutal, unhinged state, grieving not only his wife, but now his son as well. This mirrored where Rick was emotionally at that moment, having just lost his wife and struggling to hold on to his sanity. Fast forward to season 6. Rick is about to teach a naive group of Alexandrians how to survive in this new harsh world. And the man who first guided a naive Rick into this brutal new reality is now back in Morgan. While Rick believes he's figured out the world and has the blueprint to conquer it, Morgan notices Rick has changed, yet still sees him as just as naive as before. After the events of season 5, Rick is caught in a conflicted place. Though still deeply entrenched in survival mode, the influence of Michonne, Carl, and the others have pushed him to embrace civility, to give the Alexandrians a chance to treat them as he would his own group. But Rick isn't fully committed. He has very little hope for the Alexandrians' ability to adapt, and we see this troublesome dynamic unfold in the first episode. Rick and Morgan stumble upon an enormous walker horde likely to migrate toward Alexandria. Rick devises a plan to lead the horde away, requiring cooperation between his group and the Alexandrians, who must learn to adapt quickly. But Rick struggles to see the Alexandrians as anything more than expendable obstacles in the path of his own group's survival. Meanwhile, some Alexandrians doubt Rick's character, believing he'll do whatever it takes to save himself and his people, even if it means sacrificing others. And well, they're not entirely wrong. Rick's humanity has been held together through the unity with his own group, but he shut out the rest of the world, viewing everyone else as either an enemy or an obstacle. He tells Morgan that he doesn't take chances anymore and also dismisses Daryl's suggestion that he and Aaron continue recruiting, insisting people now need to take care of themselves. Daryl later argues that recruiting is taking care of themselves because people are stronger together. They're not just resources, but lifelines. Throughout the first episode, Morgan watches and evaluates who Rick has become, meeting him for the first time again after their previous encounters, the episode's title echoing this reunion. Towards the episode's end, Morgan confronts Rick about who he's become, and Rick finally lets his guard down and allows Morgan to hold Judith, one of Rick's primary symbols of hope and the future. This passing of Judith to Morgan may foreshadow a philosophical shift for Rick this season, or at least just show his willingness to listen to others again. Morgan recalls a tense encounter Rick had with a naive but troublesome Alexandrian, during which Rick was ready to kill the man. He tells Rick that while yes, he is the brutal man he saw in that confrontation, he's still also the man he encountered back in season 3, the one who told him the world wasn't over and that he still could come back. Rick then admits that he did want to kill the troublesome Alexandrian as it would have made things easier, but he restrained himself. Not because he thought the man could be saved, but because he believed the man was already beyond saving and would die eventually no matter what. Basically, the man just wasn't worth it for Rick to do it himself, and it's here Morgan understands where Rick's head is at mentally and is set on bringing his old friend back from this brutal mindset. Between seasons 3 and 6, Morgan has undergone a profound transformation, showcased in the episode Here's Not Here. Morgan begins the episode in his full brutality or clear state, and I see the show's use of the word clear as a mental and emotional reset, wiping the slate clean when one's humanity has all but disappeared. To survive, they must erase all attachments and emotion tied to past trauma by killing whatever is in front of them. Clearing. In this state, Morgan is captured by Eastman, an ultra-civil man who places him in a prison cell. Eastman believes Morgan can rediscover his humanity and plans to help him do just that. He gives Morgan the art of peace, teaches him Aikido, and preaches that all life is precious. And while Eastman dies at the episode's end, he succeeds in passing on his peaceful ideology to Morgan. Up to this point, we've seen other characters like Daryl and Michonne pulled out of their brutality, but Morgan's case is unique. His humanity seemed all but completely gone, and he appeared to have fully succumbed to the virus, becoming one of the Walking Dead himself. Unlike previous characters such as Shane, the Governor, or Gareth, whose humanity was lost forever, Morgan challenges the prior belief that you can't come back from that darkness. And this question, can you come back, is further tested when Morgan encounters the primary villains of the No Way Out arc, the Wolves. During Rick's plan to lead the Walker Horde away from Alexandria, a savage group of nomads called the Wolves ambushed the community. They crashed a large truck into the front wall, triggering the car's horn to blare and drawing half of the horde toward the town. In the opening scene of the season 5 finale, we get our first real glimpse of the Wolves when one unexpectedly sits down with Morgan at gunpoint. All the Wolves bear a W scar scratched onto their foreheads, and Morgan asks why. The man explains that the old tribes believed that the first people were wolves transformed into men, and later the first settlers alongside the natives put a bounty on the wolves' heads, hunting them to extinction. And now they believe that those wolves have returned in the human form once again, himself being one of them, along with the rest of his group. Hence why they mark themselves with a W to reflect that legacy. He tells Morgan how he and his group will raid camps, kill survivors, and set traps, embodying a similar philosophical brutality to the Walkers. Their rugged, filthy appearance and predatory behavior also reinforce this Walker comparison, along with the literal W on their forehead. Just as the Walkers represent humanity's de-evolution, so too do the Wolves. They've regressed not just to the first men, but the wolves those men were even before, the inhuman predators driven solely by survival. The wolf believes that humans aren't born civil and evolve into brutality, rather they're born brutal and evolved into civility. But interestingly, he does contradict himself during this talk with Morgan. Despite claiming to have fully embraced brutality, he expresses how much he enjoys this human interaction through conversation, and even later expresses nostalgia for movies, a thing of the old world. These small insights show that his humanity still bleeds through. His ability to miss the old world suggests that he wasn't always like this, and therefore just maybe he can still return to who he was once before. As Morgan states in their conversation, everything has a return. Yes, the brutal, inhumane nature of humans will always resurface, but it works both ways. Humans can always find their way back, returning to their civility and humanity as well. In the episode JSS, Just Survive Somehow, where the wolves attack Alexandria, we get not only deeper insight into Morgan, but also his ideological opposite at this point, Carol, as each are currently representing the direct opposing philosophies vying for Rick in the group's soul. Both Carol and Morgan lead the defense, but they're surviving and fighting in two very different ways, Carol externally and Morgan internally. We see Carol finally drop her long-running facade of civility, abandoning her doe-eyed homemaker act when killing the intruders. She fully embraces brutality, even disguising herself as a wolf by wearing their clothes and marking a W on her forehead. This here isn't just a disguise, it thematically represents Carol's alignment with the wolves and brutality. At this point, she's closer to the wolves' ideology than the Alexandrians, literally having been a wolf in sheep's clothing since she entered the gates herself. Morgan, in contrast, clings to mercy and civility at all costs, fighting only to incapacitate the wolves, tying them up, or expelling them away, and both struggle with their methods. Morgan expends more energy restraining himself from killing in order to protect his humanity, while Carol's continued violence provides a heavy mental toll that she struggles to cope with. At the beginning of the episode, Carol has a discussion with the Alexandrian housewives where she advises one of them to quit smoking, calling it a disgusting, deadly habit. And later, Carol has to mercy kill one of these women who was mortally wounded by a wolf before she could help and intervene. For a moment, Carol silently grieves with this woman in her arms, not so much for the woman herself, but because she felt like she was killing the woman she used to be, grieving that loss of her own old world innocence and civility represented in the Alexandrian woman. After the attack, Carol finds the other housewife whose pack of cigarettes lies beside her dead body. Resting on a porch, exhausted, Carol debates whether to smoke one herself. At the start of the episode, Carol saw smoking as a method of escape for the woman, a weakness that bothered her as she felt everyone, including the Alexandrians, needed to embrace the reality and face the harsh new world head on. But now, she's the one drawn to the cigarettes as they're still the same symbol of relief and escape, an escape that she now desperately needs to alleviate her trauma. As Carol debates whether to smoke, she wipes the bloodstained W from her forehead, and then notices an A stamped on the porch, the same A from the Season 5 welcome party. This thematic letter symbolizes the brutal mentality Carol is trapped in and reminds her that no matter what relief she seeks, brutality is inescapable. With that realization, she puts down the cigarette and breaks down in tears, utterly worn out. She overcame the wolves, but is still trapped by brutality, just like Rick is still stuck in the train car. The idea behind the phrase, "here is not here." At the very end of the episode, Morgan is attacked by the same wolf he met last season, but Morgan chooses not to kill him, only knocking him out. He plans to bring him back to Civility just as Eastman did with him. JSS serves as a pivotal pinch point in this arc, reminding both the characters and viewers of the relentless brutality they face. It's taken a toll on everyone, and it's the Alexandrians' first major wake-up call about the new world, in which their response isn't very encouraging. Rick's group did all the heavy lifting, and doubts grow about whether Alexandria will truly adapt and survive. Deanna begins to spiral after the wolf attack, and specifically at seeing the massive horde of walkers arriving at the walls. Rick tells her she needs to lead her people through this, but she insists they don't need her, they need him. Facing the harsh reality of the new world for the first time, she starts to question if anything she once hoped for Alexandria is actually possible anymore. She asks Rick if it was all just pie in the sky, and Rick pauses, answering with an unconfident no. Her hope is not all pie in the sky. I think Rick's no means he doesn't believe all of Deanna's vision is totally unrealistic, but that a lot of it feels very unlikely. And considering some further context from before this scene and after, I really think Rick is just saying no because he is trying to provide comfort to Deanna. In the episode Heads Up, we see Rick and the Alexandrians struggle to find hope while literally trapped by brutality with the horde of walkers, and members of their group, specifically Glenn, have yet to make it back home or make contact with the group as expected. We see Rick confront Morgan about his earlier choices in JSS, questioning why he was letting the wolves go instead of killing them. Rick tells Morgan how those same wolves he let go later tried to kill him out on the road, and Morgan says he didn't want to kill people if he didn't have to, and then asks why Rick didn't kill him back in season 3 when he was unstable and attacked Rick. Morgan explains that Rick keeping him alive led him being able to save Daryl and Aaron, but also how if he hadn't been there, Daryl and Aaron might have died and the wolves wouldn't have tracked them back to Alexandria, potentially leading to less death overall. Morgan admits he doesn't really know what's right anymore, given all these possible outcomes, but what he does know is that despite the temptation to take the easy way out and kill, every person can change. He said that he's a killer just like Rick, Carol, Pete, and even one of the wolves. He doesn't see people as strictly good or bad, but as humans capable of change and hopefully for the better. Because of that, he believes all life is precious, and in a world full of uncertainty, the one certain choice is to protect and maintain your own humanity, and also the humanity of others if possible. Later, Rick and Michonne plot ways to lead the walkers away from Alexandria. Rick suggests keeping the plan limited to their main group only, but Michonne pushes back. She points out how they're all trapped inside the walls together, and so they'll need everyone working together to survive. This is compounded by Deanna handing Rick and Michonne plans for how their home can move forward after this crisis. And then we also see Rick team up with an Alexandrian, Tobin, to help fortify the walls, with him pleading for Rick to not give up on them just yet. The episode closes with a brief moment of hope as a few green balloons float up in the sky, most likely signaling Glenn is alive. But that hope is shattered when a damaged watchtower collapses, bringing down the wall and letting the horde of walkers flood in, setting off the chaos. Survivors scramble into their houses and plan their next moves. We see Carol and Morgan clash again when she discovers he's kept the wolf alive in their home, and their conflict leads to the wolf escaping and taking Alexandria's doctor hostage. Meanwhile, Rick learns Deanna has been bitten, and in her final moment, she urges Rick to lean into civility and cooperation, reminding him his group isn't just his people, all people are his people. They're all trapped together, surrounded by brutality, and must rely on one another to navigate it. Rick then devises the plan for the group to cover themselves in walker guts like they've done before, so they'll be able to walk through the horde and escape. And as they begin this dangerous trek, we move into the arc's finale titled No Way Out, arguably the show's best. That title works on two levels. Physically, the group is trapped, surrounded by walkers with no obvious escape. The pursuit of freedom feels impossible. Thematically, it reflects the Walking Dead virus. Once infected, there's no coming back. No way out of your doomed fate. This especially applies to Rick, as we've been wondering if he can maintain his humanity and not lose himself to the virus's psychological grip. Can he escape the survivalist mindset he was trapped in during the train car at Terminus? While earlier episodes like Pretty Much Dead Already, Killer Within, Too Far Gone, and A raised these questions, No Way Out gives us the answers. Are they too far gone? Is there truly no way out of train car A? Or are we all just pretty much dead already, inevitably waiting to be consumed by the killer within? A cool thing I noticed is that Alexandria this season feels like a metaphor for the mind of her survivor. Both the town and its people began in a civil, old-world state. Since the apocalypse, threats of brutality have loomed, constantly testing the fragile peace, but the wolf's attack marks the moment the town was bitten, as its outer defenses weaken and brutality floods in. When the watchtower falls and the horde overruns Alexandria, it can symbolize the mind being completely overtaken by brutality brutality and the Walking Dead virus, leaving humanity no way out. At the start of the episode, Rick and the others put their Walker Disguise plan into action, and while clever, it ultimately fails as a solution. Their plan essentially makes them be more like the Walkers and forces them to run from their shelter once again, just like they did at the farm and the prison. This reminds me of Deanna's husband Reg talking with Maggie in the season 5 finale. Reg explains how the cavemen were all nomads and they died out because of it.
The cavemen, they were all nomads, and they all died. Then we evolved into this, and we lived. Civilization starts when we stop running, when we live together.
And so it almost feels like Rick and the group are punished for making the wrong choice here. Jesse's son Sam cracks under pressure, leading to his family's deaths and also Carl's eye being shot out. So Rick and Michonne then have to rush Carl to the infirmary, unsure if he'll survive. Meanwhile, Carol and Morgan continue their clash as the wolf runs loose with the doctor as his hostage. And while trying to escape Alexandria, the wolf ends up getting bit but ends up showing signs of humanity, sacrificing himself to save the doctor's life. Carol, watching from afar, shoots the wolf multiple times during this unexpected act of heroism, unable to fathom that he's actually helping. But after shooting, she sees him pull down walkers and urge the doctor to escape. This moment forces Carol to realize her deeply pessimistic and brutal worldview may actually be wrong, and despite the many flaws of Morgan's belief, he was right about the wolf, that his and no one else's humanity is too far gone and people can always change. This theme comes full circle with Rick, his group, and the Alexandrians in the episode's climax. After getting Carl to the infirmary, Rick must wait anxiously to see if the doctor can save his son while the deadly horde swarms outside. Rick, like Morgan after losing his son or himself in season 3 after Lori's death, begins to see red, needing to clear his rage and emotions. Refusing to sit back and be overwhelmed by his lack of control, he opens the infirmary door, pulls out his axe, and starts fighting the horde alone. And while it's badass, if left alone long enough, he would be overtaken. I think. But Michonne sees this and rallies some others to join him, not just to bring Rick back inside, but to stand and fight alongside him. At first, some survivors are confused, but ultimately inspired by not only the bravery, but the unity. Capable fighters like Carol, Rosita, and Morgan join in, and then they're also even joined by less experienced ones like Gabriel and Eugene. Eugene stating how no one can clock out now, highlighting how everyone is needed to overcome this crisis, and Gabriel proclaiming that God gave them the power to save themselves, calling back to the faith without works is dead scripture we saw earlier in the episode. But the moment that impacts Rick the most is seeing the Alexandrians leave their homes and fight back the walkers with them. It's here Rick achieves a level of synthesis, realizing anyone can adapt and change to survive in this brutal world. And patience for that change isn't easy, but it's more than worth the struggle. We saw it with the wolf, people are never too far gone to reclaim their humanity, and with the Alexandrians, people are never too far behind to catch up and adapt to the world's brutality. I previously noted how in earlier seasons, the show would intentionally kill off both the strongest current representation of civility and the strongest representation of brutality back to back. And each time, both characters would die fully embracing the philosophy they stood for. Like in season 2, Dale dies right after fighting with everything he had to spare Randall, and Shane dies after trying to kill Rick. Or in season 4, Herschel dies smiling at Rick's civil speech, while the governor dies attacking the prison. At this point, the show continues that pattern, but with a twist. Deanna represents the strongest symbol of civility, and the wolf represents the peak of brutality. But this time, Deanna dies embracing brutality, screaming and fighting back against the walkers. Meanwhile, the wolf dies saving the doctor's life. It really hammers home the theme of change, and despite all the loss, there's a sense that things might be turning hopeful. Rick's acceptance of Deanna's vision as the new leader of all Alexandria, combined with the group's stand, gives the viewer confidence that Rick can hold on to his humanity while facing everything it takes to survive, including the looming threat of Negan and the Saviors teased in the episode's opener. There's hope that neither civility nor brutality must win, but that Rick and the others can find a balance between the two. The catch of this episode is that there really is no way out externally. The group cannot physically escape Alexandria or brutality by running. The only way to survive is to stay inside the walls and fight the common enemy together. And through the events of this episode, characters like Carol, the Wolf, and Rick all have revelations that help them finally break free from their psychological prisons. If Alexandria represents the mind of a survivor infected and overrun by the Walking Dead virus, then this episode shows that people can actually come back from that state, fighting brutality with civility and human connection, and not running from the problem but facing it head on. At the end of the episode, Rick's quiet monologue to Carl in No Way Out marks the emotional and thematic turning point of The Walking Dead up to this point. After seasons of leaning on brutality as a means of survival, Rick begins to believe in something more, something greater. He admits he was wrong about the Alexandrians, and more importantly, about the possibility of building a future rooted in hope rather than fear. For the first time in a long time, Rick dares to hope again. As Carl lies unconscious in a hospital bed of sorts, Rick tells him that he got a feeling he hasn't had since before he woke up alone in that hospital bed back in season 1. And that line doesn't just mark nostalgia, it represents a reawakening in Rick. That distant memory of a life before the fall, before the violence hardened him, is now colliding with the realization that a version of that world might still be possible. A better version. Still, even after everything they've endured. Rick imagines showing Carl the new world. Not one built on dominance or survival at all costs, but one where strength is found in community. Where people choose to fight for each other, not just for themselves. It's the first time he can actually picture a future again. Not just because he wants to, but because he truly believes in it. The show's central question, civility versus brutality, doesn't land on a moment of conquest here, but through Carl's quiet hand gently squeezing Rick's. That single moment affirms Rick's hope and tells us the answer. There is a way out, not necessarily from the walkers, but from your inner darkness. In crisis and out of crisis, it's together we survive, together we rebuild, and most importantly, together we live. And I think that's what made The Walking Dead so great.